This is the presentation for drawing limits. Although many companies no longer use drawing limits in their setup, we're still going to go through the presentation. When using the 2D workspace with the ribbons, probably the easiest way to access the command is going to be to type limits at the command line. Looking at the command line, it says lower left corner 0, 0. Whenever you see an answer in brackets, and that's the answer that you want for your response, you don't have to retype it. All you have to do is hit enter to accept it. So then the upper right hand corner limits is 12, 9. So that's x coordinate and y coordinate. It's going to go over 12 units and up 9 units. If that's the answer that I desire, hit enter to accept it. And now we've set our drawing limits. The grid is on. I'm going to right click and go settings. I'm going to change the grid to dots so it's a little bit easier for you to see in the video. And then also where it says grid behavior, the adaptive grid, I'm going to turn that off. And where it says display grid beyond limits, I'm going to turn that off as well. By turning that off, that's one way that you can tell how large your drawing limits are on the screen. You can visually see it by the dots. Clicking OK. I'm going to type in Z enter, which is the zoom command, and then A enter. That does a zoom all. You'll notice that the Z entered the zoom command, and there's options in the zoom command, and A was the very first one. Now I'm zoomed out to my drawing limits. At any time you can change your drawing limits, just like any time you can change your drawing units. I'm going to change my drawing units by going to the application menu, units, and I'm going to change them from decimal to architectural, and the precision to 1/32. And I'm going to say OK. After setting my units, I'm going to type in limits at the command line again. Notice they're now in feet and inches. I'm going to hit enter. And in chapter 12, it's going to talk about how you calculate drawing limits. At this point, we just want to know how to set them. If I had a standard sheet of paper, it's 11 by 8.5 in the landscape layout. If my drawing scale is 1 inch equals a foot, and I've got 11 inches, I'd have 11 feet of drawing area. And I'd have 8.5 feet high. So I'm going to set that to 11 feet, comma, 8.5 feet, or I could say 8'6", enter. And you probably don't see anything change. That's because we're still zoomed into the 1 foot by 9 inch. I'm going to go Z enter, A enter to zoom out. Notice I have a very dense grid of dots on my screen. Sometimes when you zoom out, you'll actually get an error message at the bottom of the command line that says grid is too dense to display. Now with the adaptive grid, that won't happen. But again, the adaptive grid then is not accurate. All those spacings are not accurate. If you want to maintain the accurate grid spacing, then turn off adaptive grid, but then you're going to have to deal with this situation where maybe the grid is too dense to display. What I suggest doing in this case is, this is set up for an 11 inch by 8.5 inch sheet of paper at 1 inch equals a foot scale. So if I'm drawing at 1 inch equals a foot, do I really need my grid set to every half inch? Probably not. I'm going to go down to my grid spacing and right click, settings. Instead of my grid spacing being a half inch, maybe I can go to 6 inches. Click the other one, automatically updates. Instead of my snap spacing be a half inch, maybe I want every 3 inches. I click OK. It's updated my grid on the screen. So that's dealing with the drawing limits. One more thing that I'm going to show you, and I'm going to change our units back to decimal. Click OK. And if I go to limits, and notice I'm in decimal units, I hit enter once. And if I typed in 11 foot, comma, 8.5 feet, enter, notice I get an error message here that says invalid 2D point. That's invalid because I'm trying to put feet, or feet in inches, when I'm using decimal units. When you're using decimal, it's generic and there's no units that's associated with it. So it doesn't understand that what you're inputting. So if you get that error message, that is why. I guess that wraps up my presentation for drawing limits. Please let me know if you have any questions.